The screech of tires was the last thing Tasha heard before everything went black. Duke, the dog her late mother had given her, was lifeless on the pavement. And the man responsible? Julian Kingston, the billionaire she had just started working for. He stood there, offering her money, offering to make it right. But how could anyone fix this? As she cradled her dog, seething with rage and grief, Julian's voice broke through her anger. I didn't mean for this to happen, but it's not over. Not over? But it wasn't just an accident. Someone had deliberately made sure it would happen. And when Tasha learned who, everything she thought she knew would crumble. Welcome back, my beautiful family and friends. If you're hooked in and you're ready to enjoy this story, click subscribe and let me know in the comments where you're watching from, because tomorrow I will be giving you another story just as interesting as this one. And you don't want to miss it. Now let us begin. She had just stepped off the curb, Duke trotting happily beside her, his leash wrapped loosely around her hand. The late afternoon sun cast long shadows across the street, the golden light shimmering through the trees. It was supposed to be a peaceful walk, the kind of simple pleasure she had longed for, the kind that made her forget the grind of her daily life as a maid in the Kingston household. But then everything shattered in an instant. Duke yelped, a sound of sheer pain, and Tasha's heart stopped as she watched him flung to the side by the impact. The car came to a halt, its tires screeching as it skidded to a stop. Duke! Tasha screamed, dropping to her knees, her hands trembling as she reached for him. Blood everywhere. His small, fragile body lay still on the pavement. Her breath hitched in her throat, her eyes blurring with tears. The door of the car opened, and out stepped a man, tall, sharply dressed in an immaculate suit, his face obscured by the kind of indifference that only wealth and privilege could cultivate. He looked down at Duke, then at Tasha, his eyes flashing a flicker of concern, but it was fleeting. I'm so sorry, he said flatly, his voice cool, detached. I didn't see him. Tasha's body trembled with fury. You didn't see him? She shouted, standing up, her voice raw. You hit my dog, and all you can say is you didn't see him? Do you know what he meant to me? Do you? She was shaking now, her grief mixing with white-hot anger. Duke had been her mother's final gift to her, the one thing that had kept her tethered to memories of the woman who had raised her, loved her, and fought for her. Since her mother's passing, Duke had been all she had. And now, just like that, he was gone. I can't, the man stuttered, visibly uncomfortable under her glare. I didn't mean to hurt him. Tasha stepped toward him, her voice a snarl. You did mean it. Maybe not intentionally, but you killed him. And all you care about is that apology, huh? The man, Julian Kingston, she realized as he hesitated, searching for the right words, took a step back. His expression shifted from guilt to something that almost resembled frustration. I'm not trying to make excuses, he said. But let me help. I can cover the bills, anything you need. Tasha couldn't believe it. You think you can fix this with money? That's not what I want from you, she snapped, wiping the tears from her face. I don't want your money. I just want Duke back. Do you understand? He was all I had left. Her words hit Julian harder than she expected. His face softened, his eyes flickering with a strange emotion that Tasha couldn't place. He stepped forward, his tone now more sincere, more vulnerable. I don't know how to make this right, he said, his voice lower. But if you'll let me, I'll do whatever I can. I'll help you. Just give me a chance. Tasha looked at him for a long moment, anger and pain warring within her. She had no idea what to say. She couldn't look at him for another second without feeling that searing loss. She didn't want to accept his help. She didn't want to believe that someone like him, a billionaire, detached from the struggles of people like her, could understand the depth of her grief. But then again, she had nothing left to lose. Without saying another word, she turned away, cradling Duke's lifeless body as she walked away, her heart heavy. But Julian's voice stopped her. Wait, he called. She didn't turn back, but she heard him approach. I'm Julian Kingston, he said, his voice tinged with desperation. I know you hate me and I don't blame you. But if you'll just let me make this up to you, if you need anything, I'll be there. I swear it. Tasha didn't respond. She kept walking, the weight of her sorrow too much to bear. And yet, somewhere deep inside, a part of her wondered, could he really help? Could anyone help? Have you ever felt completely powerless in a situation, only to find someone you least expected offering you a way out? What did you do? Let us know in the comments. The days that followed were a blur. Tasha went through the motions of her daily life, making her way to the Kingston estate each morning, keeping her head down, pretending everything was okay. But inside, everything was broken. Duke had been her constant companion. The dog her mother had gifted her on her 25th birthday, just before the cancer had stolen her away. He was more than just a pet. He was family. Her mother had always told her, family is the one thing no one can take from you. But in one cruel moment, everything had been taken. Her heart felt heavy, and no matter how hard she tried to push it down, the grief clung to her like an anchor. The house had seemed colder without Duke. The mansion felt even more alien now, a place where she didn't belong, where no one cared about her pain. She had been hired as one of the new maids just a few weeks ago, tasked with cleaning the extravagant rooms, making beds, dusting shelves, and ensuring everything stayed immaculate. It was a job she needed, a job she'd fought for, and yet it often felt suffocating, watching the luxury around her while living in the shadows of others' wealth. But that wasn't the worst part. The worst part was the guilt, the nagging feeling that somehow she had failed her mother. Duke had been the last gift her mom had given her, the last piece of the woman who had raised her with so much love. And now, that gift had been ripped away. Her heart felt hollow, and no matter how hard she worked to keep the pain buried, it was always there. On the 4th day after the accident, she walked into the kitchen, only to find herself face to face with Julian again. He was standing by the counter, talking to one of the butlers. When he saw her, his eyes locked on hers, and for a moment, the rest of the world seemed to fade away. "Tasha," he said quietly, his voice like an apology. She tensed at the sound of her name. She barely acknowledged him, turning her attention to a sink full of dirty dishes. But she could feel his gaze on her, and it irritated her to no end. What did he want now? "I'm really sorry about what happened," he said after a moment, his tone soft, unsure. "I've been thinking about it a lot." Tasha didn't respond. She scrubbed a plate with unnecessary force, pretending he wasn't there. "I don't expect forgiveness, and I don't deserve it," he continued. "But I'd like to make it right. In any way I can." She turned, finally facing him, and locked eyes with him. "You don't understand, do you?" she snapped, her voice trembling with frustration. "You can't just apologize and make it go away. You took away the last part of my mother. You took away everything I had left. So don't stand there acting like you're trying to help, because you can't. You just can't." The silence between them was thick, and Tasha felt her chest tighten, her emotions threatening to spill over. But before she could turn away, something in Julian's expression shifted. His face hardened, but not in anger. In understanding. "I get it," he said softly. "I don't know what it's like to lose someone you love, but I do know what it's like to lose yourself. And I'm not offering an excuse, but I do want to help. Not because I owe you, because I need to do something to make this right. For both of us." Tasha froze. There was sincerity in his voice, a depth of emotion she hadn't expected. "You don't owe me anything," she replied bitterly. "But you owe yourself the truth. That no amount of money can fix this." Julian was quiet for a long moment. Then he nodded slowly. "You're right. I don't know what else I can do, but I'll keep trying. For as long as you'll let me." Tasha didn't know how to respond. For the first time, she saw him differently, not just the cold, arrogant billionaire, but a man who had lost something too. She didn't want to let him in. Not yet. But for some reason, she couldn't ignore the pull she felt toward him. Without another word, she turned back to the dishes, her heart in turmoil. Have you ever found yourself in a situation where someone you initially hated ended up offering something you never expected? How did you handle it? Share your thoughts in the comments. The following days dragged on, each one blurring into the next, but there was one thing Tasha couldn't shake, the pull she felt when Julian was around. It wasn't attraction, not at first. It was something more complicated, something that made her angry because she didn't want to feel it. He was the reason she had lost Duke. He was the reason her life had been turned upside down. But still, when their paths crossed, when their eyes met for just a moment too long, she couldn't deny the flicker of something deeper beneath the surface. Something she didn't know how to handle. And so she buried it, forced it to the back of her mind, and focused on her work. But then, for days later, everything changed. Tasha had just finished tidying the living room of the Kingston estate, carefully fluffing pillows and straightening picture frames when the phone rang in the kitchen. The sharp trill of it startled her, breaking the usual quiet of the house. She hesitated. Usually, she didn't answer the phone. It wasn't her place. But when she heard Julian's voice on the other end, her heart skipped. "Tasha? It's Julian. I need to talk to you. It's important." His voice was different, urgent, tinged with something she couldn't quite place. She frowned, her mind instantly racing. Was it about Duke? Had he found something? "I'm busy," she said, her tone harder than she meant it to be. There was a pause on the other end of the line. "Please, Tasha. I need to speak with you about something. It's important." She sighed, rolling her eyes but feeling a strange compulsion to hear him out. "Fine. But I'm not here to have some long conversation. Can you meet me in the garden? In 15 minutes? He asked. "I'm not your assistant," she shot back, trying to push her anger to the surface again. "Why don't you just text me?" "I can't explain everything over text," he said quietly. "Please. Just meet me. I promise it's worth your time." She hung up, standing still for a moment, her fingers still clutching the receiver. The tension in her chest tightened. Against her better judgment, Tasha found herself making her way to the garden. The sprawling lawns of the Kingston estate were beautiful, lush with flowers, fountains, and trimmed hedges. Everything about it was pristine and unbothered by the worries of the world. But Tasha was anything but pristine. She was raw, still broken from losing Duke, from the pain that Julian had unknowingly caused. As she stepped into the garden, she saw Julian standing near a small stone bench, his hands clasped behind his back, his posture stiff. The soft evening light cast a shadow over his face, but there was something in his eyes, something almost desperate. "I didn't want to do this over the phone," he said, turning toward her as she approached. "I found something. Something that may change everything." Tasha's heart began to race, her pulse quickening. "What do you mean?" she asked, her voice hard, but with a hint of curiosity she couldn't suppress. He handed her a folded piece of paper, his fingers brushing against hers for a fraction of a second. She almost pulled away, but something in the way his eyes met hers made her pause. "I've been trying to make sense of everything that's happened," he continued, "and I found this. It's a letter. From the mechanic who worked on my car before the accident. He said there was a second set of brake repairs done, without my permission, by someone else. Someone who clearly didn't want me to know about it." Tasha felt a chill run through her. "Are you telling me someone tampered with your car? On purpose?" Julian nodded. "Yes. And it gets worse. I found out that the mechanic who worked on the car was bribed. Someone paid him to not report the faulty brakes. Someone who had access to my personal files." Her stomach dropped. It wasn't just an accident. It was a deliberate act of sabotage. "Why didn't you tell me sooner?" Tasha asked, her voice low, tinged with disbelief. "Why bring me into this now?" Julian took a step closer, his voice steady but intense. "Because I think you're the target. The person who was meant to be hurt in all this wasn't me, it was you. You were meant to pay the price for something I did a long time ago. For something I didn't even know was happening until now." Tasha's heart pounded in her chest as the weight of his words hit her. She couldn't comprehend it all at once. Someone had been plotting against him, using her as a pawn, and for what? What was the reason? "Who would do that?" she asked, barely able to speak. "I don't know," he said quietly. "But I need your help to find out." She stared at him for a long moment, her mind racing. The woman who had once been certain she didn't need anyone was now standing on the edge of something much bigger than herself. She wanted to say no. She wanted to push him away, to turn her back on everything that had caused her pain. But the truth was, she didn't feel so alone anymore. Tasha nodded. "I'll help you. What would you do if someone used you as a pawn in their game, without your knowledge?" Would you stand your ground or take action? Share your thoughts in the comments below. The days after Tasha agreed to help Julian felt like a blur, each one more tense and more confusing than the last. The garden, where they had first met in such strange circumstances, became their place of quiet conversation. They met in secret, avoiding the prying eyes of the staff. The more they uncovered, the deeper they sank into a mystery neither of them had expected, and neither of them had the answers to. Julian had been relentless, going through his private files, cross-checking documents, and tracing back every conversation and transaction leading up to the accident. But the more they dug, the more they realized this wasn't just a random act of malice. There was something personal behind it, a deliberate attempt to destroy not only Julian, but also anyone close to him. And somehow, that had included her. "You're sure you're okay?" Julian asked one evening as they sat in the small, secluded corner of the garden, the soft hum of the city far behind them. His eyes were locked on hers, concerned, like he was trying to read her, to understand the depths of the pain she'd been through. Tasha looked at him, not knowing how to answer. There was something about him that softened her, made her want to trust him when every instinct told her to keep her distance. "I'm getting there," she said after a long pause, taking in a slow breath. "I'm trying to, but I don't think I'll ever really be okay with what happened. And I still don't know what you want from me." Julian's expression flickered between uncertainty and something else, something more vulnerable. "I don't want anything from you, Tasha. I just want to make this right. I don't expect you to forgive me. I don't even think I deserve it. But I need your help because I need to make sure this doesn't happen to anyone else. Not like this." She nodded slowly, feeling her chest tighten. It had been hard to admit this to herself, but in those moments when they sat together, when their hands brushed, she could feel something changing between them, something she couldn't ignore. "I don't know if I can help you," she said softly, "but I'll try. For me. For everything." Julian gave her a small, appreciative smile, his eyes softening. "Thank you." The next few days felt like a whirlwind. They spent hours poring over documents, files, and reports, trying to put the puzzle pieces together. The deeper they went, the more they uncovered about Zachary Lane, the man who had been Julian's former business partner and who had been quietly working to destroy everything Julian had built. But it wasn't just about business. It was personal. Zachary had somehow known about Tasha's mother, had known about the gift of Duke, about how much the dog had meant to her, and how it was the last piece of her life that she held onto. Tasha still didn't know how Zachary had found out about Duke, but what she did know was that the man had used it against her. She felt sick to her stomach as Julian showed her the latest evidence, an anonymous email that was traced back to Zachary's account. It was a chilling message. "You took everything from me, Julian. I will take everything from you." Her hand trembled as she read it aloud. What did he mean by this? How did he know so much about me? Julian's jaw tightened. "I don't know yet, but it's clear he's been planning this for a long time." Tasha felt her stomach twist. She had always been invisible to the world around her, just another maid in the sprawling Kingston estate, just another face in a sea of luxury. But now, she realized that someone had been watching her. Someone had been watching them. She looked at Julian, her mind racing. What if we can't stop him? What if he gets away with this? "I won't let him," Julian said firmly, stepping closer to her, his voice steady. "I'll stop him, Tasha. No matter what it takes." For a moment, their eyes locked, something unspoken, something raw between them. She swallowed, the weight of their shared mission making her pulse quicken. "And what if you can't stop him?" Julian took another step forward, his face inches from hers. "Then I'll fight until I can't fight anymore." She felt her heart thud in her chest, the warmth of his breath mingling with her own. She wanted to pull away, she wanted to keep the distance she'd built between them, but her body didn't listen. She was drawn to him. He was offering her a chance for something she hadn't dared to believe in since losing her mother and Duke, hope. "Julian," she whispered, her voice trembling, "I don't know how to trust you." He leaned in, his forehead just barely touching hers. I know, Tasha. And I don't expect you to trust me completely. But I promise you, I'll do everything I can to earn it." And in that moment, she didn't know why, But she believed him. For the first time in a long time, she felt like maybe, just maybe, there could be more to life than pain and loss. Have you ever been in a situation where trust seemed impossible but you still decided to take a chance? What made you finally believe? Let us know in the comments. The following days were a whirlwind of investigation, planning, and mounting tension. Julian and Tasha had become an unlikely pair, working together side by side in secret, their shared goal of stopping Zachary Lane drawing them closer. But with each passing hour, the feeling of unease crept in deeper. Something didn't add up, and Tasha couldn't shake the nagging feeling that they were missing a piece of the puzzle. She had started to let her guard down, just a little. Julian, despite everything, had become someone she could rely on. Every time they sat together, whether it was late at night going through old files or talking through their next steps, there was a moment when their eyes would meet, longer than necessary, and a spark would flicker between them. It was subtle, almost imperceptible, but it was there. And it was pulling her in. Still, Tasha kept her distance, reminding herself why she couldn't allow herself to get too close to him. He was the one who had destroyed her life when he hit Duke. And yet, this man was also the one who, over the last few days, had fought relentlessly to make things right. It was a confusing, complicated mess of emotions she wasn't sure she could untangle. But everything changed when she discovered something she wasn't supposed to. It was late in the evening when Julian sent her an urgent message. "Meet me in the study. I found something. Something important." Tasha's heart raced. She quickly gathered her things, her hands shaky as she pushed open the door to the study. The large room was lit only by the soft glow of a desk lamp. Julian standing by the desk with a stack of papers in front of him. His posture was tense, his face pale. "Julian, what's going on?" she asked, walking toward him, her mind already whirling with questions. He turned to face her, his eyes dark with frustration. "I found a connection between Zachary and someone in my inner circle. Someone I thought I could trust." Tasha's heart skipped a beat. "Who?" Julian looked down, his face scrunching with something between anger and disbelief. "My brother." Tasha froze, the weight of his words hitting her like a ton of bricks. "Your brother? You think he's been working with Zachary?" Julian nodded grimly, rubbing his temples as if trying to make sense of everything. "I don't know. But I found emails. Transactions. A trail of money that leads straight to him." Tasha's stomach churned. "You're telling me someone in your own family is behind this?" "I don't want to believe it," Julian whispered, as though saying the words aloud made them more real. "But everything points to him. He's the one who pushed me out of the company years ago, and now I think he's been using Zachary to get back at me, through you." Tasha's head spun. She couldn't process it all. "No, that doesn't make sense. Why would your brother want to target me?" "Because Zachary knew you were important to me," Julian said, his voice rising with frustration. "And he knew that if he hurt you, he could hurt me." Tasha's chest tightened. The pieces were coming together, but they didn't make any sense. "But why me? Why was I dragged into this? What do I have to do with your family's war?" Julian looked at her, his face torn. "Everything. You're not just a random person, Tasha. You were my mother's last gift. Zachary knew that if he went after you, he could break me in ways I couldn't foresee." Tasha felt the weight of his words, a surge of something unfamiliar pulling at her chest. She took a step back, her mind racing. And Duke, he wasn't just a dog. He was part of their plan, wasn't he? "Yes," Julian said, his voice breaking. "That's why Zachary took him. He knew how much you loved him. And when he took Duke away from you, he knew it would push me to a place I couldn't recover from." Tasha felt the ground shift beneath her feet. Everything she had believed, everything she had thought she understood, had been turned upside down. She had been nothing more than a pawn in a dangerous game. And yet, her heart ached for Julian, even as she realized the depths of the betrayal he was facing. "But you," Tasha started, her voice barely above a whisper. "Why didn't you tell me sooner? Why didn't you tell me about your brother?" Julian's eyes darkened, his voice steady but filled with guilt. "Because I never wanted you involved in any of this. I thought I could protect you from it, that I could fix things without dragging you into it. But now, I don't know who I can trust. And I don't want you to be the next target. Tasha swallowed hard, her throat tight with emotion. You've been protecting me this whole time? Even when I hated you? Julian nodded, his gaze softening. Even when you hated me? Tasha turned away, stepping toward the window. Her mind raced, struggling to process everything he had just told her. She had never imagined that something like this, a complicated mess of family, betrayal, and revenge, could be happening right beneath her nose. She couldn't breathe. She couldn't think. The only thing that kept her grounded was the fact that Julian was still there. He had been there, fighting for her, despite everything. And despite her own resistance, despite her anger, something was shifting inside her. She turned back toward him. What do we do now? I don't know, Julian admitted. But whatever happens, I won't let you face this alone. What would you do if you found out the person you cared about was keeping secrets that could change everything? Would you confront them or walk away? Let us know your thoughts in the comments. Tasha couldn't sleep that night. Every time she closed her eyes, she saw Duke's body lying lifeless on the pavement, saw the cold indifference in Julian's eyes as he stepped out of the car. She tried to push those images away, but now, after everything they had uncovered, those images had been replaced by something even darker, the truth. Julian's brother was involved. Zachary was pulling strings. The whole thing had been orchestrated as a twisted form of revenge against Julian, with Tasha caught in the crossfire, used as a pawn in a game that had already taken too much from her. She sat up, staring at the ceiling, her mind spinning. The magnitude of it all was overwhelming. She had been so focused on her grief, so lost in her own pain, that she hadn't seen the bigger picture. She had trusted Julian, but now everything seemed like a lie. She had been dragged into something much darker than she had ever anticipated. The man who had destroyed her life, who had made her feel so helpless, was now asking her to help him stop the very people who had been manipulating her. She didn't know if she could trust him anymore. And yet, a part of her couldn't turn away. A part of her still wanted to believe that there was more to him than the arrogant billionaire who had crushed her heart. Suddenly, the sound of her phone buzzing across the night table cut through the silence. Tasha grabbed it, her heart racing, but when she saw the message, her stomach dropped. Julian Kingston. I think I've found where they're keeping him. Meet me in 20 minutes. It's time to end this. Tasha's hands trembled as she typed a response. Tasha, are you sure about this? Julian's reply was almost immediate. Julian Kingston. No. But we don't have a choice anymore. Tasha took a deep breath, her chest tight with anxiety. She had to do this. She couldn't walk away. Not now. Not when they were so close to finding out the truth. But the fear inside her felt suffocating. What if they didn't make it out of this? What if Julian was wrong, and the person who had been controlling everything all along wasn't someone they could beat? 20 minutes later, Tasha met Julian outside the estate, both of them silent as they climbed into one of his sleek black cars. There was an unspoken understanding between them now. The weight of everything that had happened, the betrayal, the lies, the broken trust, hung in the air like a cloud, but they both knew they had to move forward. There was no going back. Not now. As they drove through the darkened streets, Tasha couldn't help but notice how different everything felt. The city had always been a place of hope for her, a place where she could make something of herself, despite everything. But now, it felt like the walls were closing in. She couldn't escape the feeling that someone was watching them, that they were being led into a trap they couldn't see. I'm scared, Julian, Tasha admitted, her voice barely above a whisper. What if this is a setup? What if we're walking into something we can't get out of? Julian glanced at her, his jaw tight. I'm scared too, he said quietly. But I don't think we have a choice. If we don't stop them now, they'll do the same thing to someone else. Maybe to you. Or me. I won't let that happen. Tasha looked at him, her heart racing. She didn't know if it was his words or the look in his eyes that made her feel like she might finally understand him. He was fighting for something, for her, for the truth, and it was tearing him apart. As they neared the location Julian had found, an old, abandoned warehouse on the outskirts of the city, a feeling of dread crept over Tasha. She hadn't realized until now just how much danger they were in. The place was isolated, dark. It didn't look like anything more than a desolate building, left to rot in a forgotten corner of the city. Tasha felt her chest tighten as they pulled up to the entrance, but Julian didn't stop. He parked the car behind a line of old trucks, the engine dying with a soft rumble. "We go in, grab Duke and get out," Julian said, his tone sharp, his focus unwavering. "Stay close to me. Don't talk unless you have to. We don't know what we're walking into." Tasha nodded, her throat dry. She couldn't even bring herself to speak. The fear, the adrenaline, the anger, it all coiled inside her, a pressure building that threatened to burst. She was scared, but she wasn't going to back down. They moved silently toward the building's rear entrance, their footsteps muffled by the cold concrete. Julian's hand brushed against hers, just for a second, but it was enough to send a jolt through her. She didn't know if it was the terror of the situation or the closeness they had developed over the past days, but something in her chest fluttered painfully. They reached the door, Julian pushing it open carefully. The sound of creaking hinges echoed in the silence. Inside, the air was thick with dust and decay. The faint hum of a distant generator buzzed in the background. As they moved deeper into the building, Tasha's heart pounded harder. She didn't know what they were going to find, whether Duke was there, whether Zachary or his men were waiting for them. The uncertainty gnawed at her. But then they heard it. A faint bark. A small sound but unmistakable. Tasha felt a surge of hope rush through her, followed by a wave of panic. They were close. But so were the dangers that lurked in the shadows. Suddenly, a voice, sharp, cutting through the air, shouted, "You should have stayed away, Julian." Tasha froze. It was Zachary. How do you handle fear when everything inside you is screaming to run? Do you face it head-on, or retreat? Let us know in the comments. The voice echoed through the warehouse, sharp and filled with malice. "You should have stayed away, Julian." Tasha's heart skipped a beat. She froze, her body tense, every muscle coiled in fear. Julian's hand instinctively moved to the side, brushing hers once more. This time, it wasn't a simple gesture, it was a grounding force. His touch steadied her, reminding her that she wasn't alone in this. "Stay close," Julian whispered, his voice low and commanding, his eyes scanning the shadows ahead. They moved forward, slowly, cautiously. The sound of Duke's barking was still faint, but it was there. Tasha's pulse quickened. He was so close. She could feel the connection between her and her dog even in the darkest corners of this place, a tether pulling her forward, a promise that she wouldn't leave without him. "Zachary," Julian called out, his voice strong, though Tasha could hear the underlying tension. "I know you're here. This ends tonight." A low chuckle echoed back, bouncing off the cold walls. "You think this is about you, Julian?" Zachary's voice was dark, twisted. "No, this is about power, control. And you lost that the second you trusted her." Tasha's throat tightened. The realization hit her like a punch in the gut. This had all been about Julian losing control. About Zachary using her, her grief, her pain, as a tool to destroy him. The dog she'd loved, the one thing that had anchored her after her mother's death, had become the weapon in someone else's twisted game. "You don't know anything about her," Julian spat, his eyes flashing with defiance. "I'm done letting you manipulate my life. And hers." There was a shift in the air. The warehouse seemed to hold its breath. Then there was a thud, followed by a soft whimper. It was Duke. Tasha's breath caught in her throat. "Where is he?" she demanded, stepping forward, her voice raw with desperation. "Patience," Zachary's voice came from the shadows. "He's right where I need him to be." Suddenly, a figure stepped out from the shadows, tall, gaunt, his face twisted into a malicious grin. Zachary Lane. He was holding Duke by a leash, the poor dog looking scared but alive. The relief that rushed through Tasha was almost unbearable. But as her eyes locked on the man who had caused all of this, a surge of anger, pure and primal, rippled through her. "You bastard!" she shouted, her voice breaking with fury. "You used him to hurt me, to hurt Julian. You manipulated me. You think I'm just a pawn in your game?" Zachary's grin faltered for a brief moment, but then he sneered, tightening his grip on Duke's leash. A pawn? You're the queen. The one who could bring him down. All I had to do was break you. A flood of realization washed over Tasha. This was never about Julian. This had always been about her. About breaking her, destroying her peace, and using her pain to make Julian vulnerable. But what they didn't realize, was that Tasha wasn't weak. She wasn't broken. Not anymore. She stepped forward, heart pounding in her chest, her breath shallow with both fear and rage. She was no longer afraid of this man. No longer afraid of the situation. Because in that moment, with her dog alive in front of her and the man who had tried to destroy her so close, she felt something inside her shift. She wasn't powerless. She wasn't a victim. She was stronger than they had ever known. Without thinking, Tasha lunged forward, reaching for the leash. But Zachary, faster than she expected, yanked Duke back with a harsh tug. "Don't you dare touch him," she yelled, her voice raw as the anger surged up in her chest. "You think you're strong?" Zachary mocked. "You think you can just take back everything I've stolen?" Tasha stood her ground, her eyes locked on him. "I don't need you to give me anything. I'm done being your pawn." In that moment, Julian stepped forward, his hand on her shoulder. He stood beside her, not as a protector, but as an equal. Together they faced Zachary. The dynamic had shifted. The man who had once been the arrogant billionaire now stood alongside the woman he had tried to break, and she was no longer afraid. "Let him go," Julian said, his voice low, commanding. Zachary's eyes flickered between them, uncertainty creeping into his expression for the first time. "You really think you can take me down?" Tasha met his gaze, her voice steady. "We already have." Before Zachary could respond, Julian made a move. A calculated move that caught Zachary off guard. He grabbed the leash from his hand and pulled Duke toward them. In one fluid motion, Julian held the dog safely in his arms, and Tasha stepped in front of Zachary, blocking his path. "You've lost," Julian said firmly, "and we're not leaving here until you're held accountable." For the first time, there was a flicker of panic in Zachary's eyes. What does it take to find your inner strength? When have you stood up for yourself in a moment of fear or vulnerability? Share your thoughts in the comments below. The tension in the air thickened. The distant hum of the generator seemed to fade into nothingness as time stretched, hanging heavy between them. Zachary's posture stiffened, his hand hovering near his waistband as if contemplating his next move. Tasha, her eyes locked on his, could see the flicker of desperation behind his steely exterior. He wasn't the same man who had been pulling strings from the shadows. Now he was cornered, facing the consequences of his actions for the first time. Julian held Duke tightly in his arms, his eyes never leaving Zachary. "You're finished, Zachary. This ends tonight." Zachary's lips curled into a bitter smile. "You think you've won?" he spat, his voice filled with venom. "You don't know the half of it." Tasha stepped forward, ignoring the flutter of uncertainty in her chest. She wasn't scared anymore. Not of him. Not of the mess they had found themselves in. Not even of the past she tried to outrun for so long. She was ready to face whatever came next. "I don't need to know all of it," Tasha said, her voice unwavering. "I know enough to know that I'm done being your victim. Done letting you control my life. And if you think you can get away with this, then you're wrong." Zachary laughed darkly, taking a step back as if he was sizing up their next move. He hadn't expected them to fight back. He hadn't expected them to stand together like this. And for the first time, Julian and Tasha weren't just two people trying to survive. They were a team. "You don't even realize the danger you're in, do you?" Zachary's tone shifted, as though he was savoring the moment. "You think exposing me will stop everything? You think it'll fix all the mess I've made? This is bigger than you. Bigger than both of you." Tasha felt her heart race as she realized what he was hinting at. "What are you talking about?" she demanded. Zachary's eyes gleamed with malice. "I'm just the beginning." "Julian," he turned to face him, "you think you're the only one I've targeted? Do you think this is just about you? You really have no idea how many people are behind all of this, do you?" Julian's brow furrowed as he took a step toward him. "What are you saying?" Before Zachary could respond, there was a sudden shout from the shadows. Enough. A figure stepped out from behind a stack of crates, their silhouette casting a long shadow in the dim light. It was another man, familiar to Julian, but not one he had expected to see here. Mark. Julian's voice was a mix of shock and betrayal. The man, Mark Kingston, Julian's own brother, stepped forward. His expression was cold, calculating. "You really thought it was just Zachary pulling the strings, didn't you?" he said, his voice almost amused. "You never knew I was in on it. You never saw it coming." Tasha's stomach dropped as the reality of it hit her. Julian's brother? The man who had been helping him through this, offering support, and now they found out he had been working with Zachary all along? It was too much. "Mark," Julian said, his voice barely above a whisper, a sense of disbelief in his eyes. "You were in on this from the start?" Mark gave a small, twisted smile. "I had to clean up your mess, Julian. You ruined everything when you cut me out of the company. But I was smart. I knew you'd come crawling back when you realized just how much control you'd lost." Tasha felt the world around her tilt. Betrayal. It ran deeper than she'd ever imagined. Julian had thought his brother was someone he could trust. But this man, this cold-hearted stranger in front of them, had been orchestrating everything from the shadows. It was his plan to destroy Julian. To destroy them. "This whole time, you were working with Zachary?" Tasha demanded, her voice shaking with fury. "You used Julian, just to get back at him?" Mark's smile widened. "It was never about getting back at Julian," he said, his voice dark. "It was about getting rid of the one thing that stood in the way of my success. And that's you, Julian. Your failure, your weakness, you caring about people, about her, has been your downfall from the start." Julian's fists clenched at his sides. "You think you've won?" he said, his voice low and dangerous. "You think you can tear us apart and walk away unscathed?" Mark's grin only grew wider. "I already have." Suddenly, there was a sharp sound, the screech of metal on stone, and a flash of movement. Tasha's heart raced as Julian lunged forward, his hand reaching for his brother, but Mark was already pulling something out of his jacket, a gun. Tasha froze. "Stay where you are," Mark snarled, his eyes wild. "This is bigger than you can imagine, Julian. Don't get in my way." Tasha's mind raced. She didn't know what to do, but she knew one thing. She couldn't let him win. Not again. Without thinking, she stepped in front of Julian, her voice filled with steely resolve. "No. You're not doing this. Not anymore." Mark laughed, a twisted, guttural sound. "And what? You think you can stop me?" Julian grabbed her arm, pulling her behind him. "Tasha, get back," he warned. But she didn't. She stood her ground, looking Mark dead in the eye. "I'm not afraid of you," she said. In that moment, something changed between them. The fear, the pain, all of it started to recede. They had been broken, pulled apart by so many forces. But now, standing here together, they realized they weren't just fighting for survival anymore. They were fighting for each other. With a sudden, coordinated movement, Julian lunged forward, knocking Mark's arm to the side just as the gun went off, the bullet hitting the concrete floor. Julian tackled him to the ground, the gun skidding across the floor, out of reach. Tasha didn't wait. She grabbed Duke, who had been watching the whole scene, wagging his tail uncertainly. She pulled him close, her heart pounding as she ran toward the exit. Julian followed quickly, his face grim, his eyes filled with something deeper now. Something he hadn't felt in a long time. When everything seems lost, how do you find the strength to fight back? Is it about love? Loyalty? Or something else? Let us know in the comments below. The sound of footsteps echoed through the hall as Julian and Tasha moved swiftly toward the exit, Duke trailing closely behind them. Every nerve in Tasha's body was on high alert, but something had shifted in her heart. The fear had dissipated, replaced with a powerful clarity, a clarity that told her she wasn't just a victim of this twisted game anymore. She had a say in how this ended, and she wasn't going to let anyone take control of her life again. They burst through the door and into the cool night air, the full weight of the danger they had just escaped pressing down on her. Tasha barely had time to catch her breath before Julian grabbed her arm, pulling her into the safety of his SUV, slamming the door behind them. Are you okay? He asked, his voice rough with emotion. Tasha looked at him for a long moment, still processing everything that had happened. The betrayal, the danger, the near escape. But most of all, she saw something different in him. Something raw, something that wasn't just about the fight they had been through. I'm okay, she said quietly, her voice steady, even though her heart was racing. We're okay. For now. Julian didn't answer immediately. He just drove, his hands gripping the wheel with determination, his jaw tight with unresolved anger. But Tasha could see the way his gaze kept flicking to her, the silent understanding between them growing stronger with each passing moment. And then he spoke. I don't know how to fix this, he said softly, almost to himself. I don't know how to fix what happened between us. What I did. I hurt you. And I can never take that back. Tasha didn't know what to say. The words that had been building in her throat since the accident, since everything that had spiraled out of control, were caught there. But then, as they reached the main road, she turned to him, her voice soft but sure. You did hurt me, she said quietly. But you didn't mean to. And what's happening now? I don't think it's about what happened between us anymore, Julian. It's about what happens next. Together. He glanced at her, his eyes full of something she couldn't name. Together? He asked, his voice raw. Tasha nodded, a small smile tugging at her lips. Yeah. I don't know how we got here. But I'm not running away from it. Not from you. Not anymore. Julian's hand reached out, resting on the console between them, his fingers brushing against hers. The touch was tentative at first, unsure, but when she didn't pull away, he gave her a small, almost apologetic smile. And then she did something she hadn't done in days. She laughed. A small, relieved laugh that felt like the first deep breath she'd taken in a long time. We still have a lot to figure out, she said, her eyes sparkling. But I think we can do it. I think we can too, Julian said, his smile growing, though there was a trace of uncertainty still in his eyes. But no more secrets. No more lies. I promise you, Tasha. I'm done hiding. I'm done running from my own mistakes. Tasha's heart fluttered in her chest. I'm done running too. They drove in silence for a few moments, the weight of everything beginning to settle between them, until the tension between them slowly melted away. They were going to figure it out. They were going to find a way forward together. The Kingston estate was quieter than usual, the tension of the past few days finally dissipating. Tasha stood in the kitchen, Duke curled at her feet as she worked on preparing a light meal, her mind wandering over everything that had happened. She hadn't expected any of it. The danger, the betrayal, the dark secrets of the family she had come to serve. And yet, here she was, standing in the middle of Julian's kitchen, a place she never thought she'd feel any kind of peace. But now, the house felt different. It didn't feel like a prison anymore. It felt like home. A home she had fought to create for herself, with the man who had once caused her so much pain. A man who, in the end, had helped her find her strength again. The door opened behind her, and she turned to see Julian standing in the doorway, his eyes softer than she had ever seen them. You okay? He asked, a small smile playing at the corners of his mouth. Yeah, she said, smiling back. I'm okay. I've been thinking, Julian began, his tone suddenly serious. We can't change the past. We can't undo what happened to you, to Duke, to us. But we can make the future better. And I want to do that. With you. Tasha's heart skipped a beat. With me. He nodded, stepping closer to her, his hand reaching out. Yeah. I don't want to keep running from this, from us. We've been through hell, but we're still standing. And I want to keep standing by you. If you'll let me. Tasha's eyes softened as she looked up at him. In that moment, everything fell into place. The pain. The betrayal. The confusion. It had all brought them here, to this moment where they were both finally willing to face whatever came next. Together. She reached for his hand, intertwining her fingers with his. I'm not going anywhere, she said, her voice filled with quiet strength. Let's face it together. He smiled, his eyes shining with something that wasn't just hope. It was the promise of something new, something real. I think this is just the beginning, he whispered. And for the first time in a long time, Tasha believed it. Sometimes, It takes facing our darkest fears to finally see the light. Have you ever found strength in a difficult situation that turned your life around? Share your thoughts in the comments. Thank you for watching this story to the end. If you enjoyed this story, you will surely love the next one. It's as crazier and more intriguing as you can ever imagine. So do check it out. Click on the image showing on your screen right now to watch the next one.